This boy sank into the ocean. Taiha was just a child when his family was betrayed in the middle of the sea. There was nothing he could do. He swam through the raging waves, trying to reach his mother. But when he found her, she was already dead. Taiha couldn't believe what was happening until a massive wave dragged his body down into the depths and around him. Everyone he knew was sinking one by one. Just as he was about to drown, someone grabbed him. It was his grandfather, the supreme leader of the Cheongu group. Trembling, Taiha tried to speak about his parents, but the old man stopped him and said, "No matter what happens, never forget this. You must take revenge on them all." Then he handed Taiha a pen, the symbol that would mark him as the rightful heir. After that, his grandfather took off his own life jacket, put on Taiha, and threw him back into the sea. Days later, the boy was found by the Italian mafia, the ones who would create the greatest assassin in history, a cold man driven only by his lonely quest for revenge. The cause of it was a large cargo ship passing through the area. A person smiles while their face is obscured by the light. Taiha was very scared and confused after being rescued. Two guards equipped with rifles are surprised to see that the child is still alive. One of them begins to shout for his boss, announcing that the boy is okay. Hearing a language different from his own, the protagonist realizes they are both Italian. The man continued trying to communicate with his boss. Someone seems to hear that call. While one of them complains about his boss being in that place again, a heavy-set man asks if the child can understand him. However, Taiha observes the tattoo standing out on the man's neck. Thus, the protagonist understands that with that tattoo and those weapons, the people on that ship are not ordinary. Suddenly, the leader of the group leaps from where she was, startling him. The woman lands in front of the boy, questioning how he reached her ship. Her subordinate warns that the child might not speak their language. Irritated, she orders them to bring someone who can help them communicate. Taiha just watches them, slightly nervous, not knowing how to react. However, surprising the woman, he speaks in Italian, explaining that he was on a yacht that was attacked nearby. At this, she questions where that impressive child came from. He explains that he is Korean and that during the storm, his family ship was invaded by armed people who killed his parents and grandfather. The leader says that apparently after being shipwrecked, he reached the Cerno family ship. Confused, the boy wonders what the Cerno family is. She begins to laugh at the situation since an Asian child who speaks Italian claims to have come from the Gulf of Aden in the Middle East. Taking a knife, the woman says that it is shameful, but she cannot believe it. Pointing the blade at the boy, Regina asks if there is any reason why she shouldn't throw him back into the sea. The boy doesn't know what to say to avoid that. Nervous, he tries to think of something as quickly as possible. Thus, Taiha shows the pen given to him by his grandfather, explaining that he is the grandson of Seoko, chairman of the Cheongu group, and the son of Siak, his grandfather's third son. He argues that instead of throwing him back, they could help him get in touch with his people, thereby reaping benefits. Agitated, Regina asks if he's really talking about the Cheongu group. She notes that this is the most successful conglomerate in South Korea, and apparently that Brat is part of the family. Therefore, the woman in charge orders her subordinates to check the news related to Korea. While they both look for something related to what the boy said, the woman asks if the child speaks any other languages. He informs her that he knows Cantonese, English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi, and Esperanto, claiming to be fluent enough to have basic conversations. One of the men says he found some news from Korea. Regina smiles, realizing that this is fascinating. She says that if the boy wants to contact someone from Korea, he can ask them. But the boy remembers what his grandfather had said, asking him to look for Lawyer Kim, as the man would know how to assist him. The protagonist states that he needs her to contact someone from outside his family. In Seoul, at 1:12 a.m., someone answers the phone asking who it is. The person says they're calling from abroad, warning that they will communicate only in English, asking if he is Lawyer Kim. Regina says that from the photo she sent him, the lawyer must have already realized she has the group's precious grandson with her, asking if she should send him back to Korea. The old man instead questions what she means by that. She makes an offer of $10 million, informing him they should meet at the Panama Canal for the exchange. However, the guy claims he is too busy to negotiate, so he makes a counteroffer, offering $1 million. Leaving his glass of drink on the table, he picks up a microphone that was nearby, swearing and saying it will be $1 million. While dancing with some people, the madman says he will pay $1 million if she kills Taiha, ordering the woman to kill the boy and send him video proof within the next 5 minutes. He promises she will receive $1 million as a reward. Regina asks what would happen if he didn't send the money after the job. While everyone watches, the lawyer assures her that he only needs to make 3 taps on his phone to send such a small amount. Furthermore, if she doesn't do it, Kim says he will release to the press that they were the ones responsible for the attacks. Hanging up the call, he tells his master there is no need to worry as he has contacted some mercenaries near them. Thanks to that, the Cheongu group is now all theirs. The boy was still paralyzed by everything he heard. After all, that man wants him dead in the next 5 minutes, making him increasingly scared. The woman says that apparently that's how things work since, because of that, her reason for keeping him alive is gone. Terrified, Taiha begins to beg them not to kill him. However, Regina states that he is no longer a member of a rich family. Besides, they're likely already preparing a funeral for him. Questioning if the boy knows what that means, claiming that this is quite common in her world. People killing others to take over their assets and achievements. Terrified, he complains about why his uncles and relatives are planning to kill his entire family. Both guards talk to each other, saying their boss won't kill him, but she is having fun while teasing him. Trembling, he cannot believe he survived the sea only to die at the hands of people he doesn't even know. Wondering what Chonga means, and if it was really worth killing his parents and grandfather for the positions they held. Suddenly, someone enters the room, announcing they are under attack. The guy informs them that 3 patrol ships and an extremely armed military helicopter have appeared. She asks if it's Interpol. However, the man says no and explains that they are ignoring their radio transmissions. Regina doesn't understand what is happening. After all, it would have to be someone very crazy to do something like that. Looking at the child, she finally understands the culprit, realizing that those Koreans must have contacted those people to look for that boy. Out of nowhere, Taiha stabs his right hand with the pen. No one understands what that child is trying to do. He says the Chonga group will never give her the money. Furthermore, the woman has nothing to gain if she kills him. The trade leader of the Salerno family is surprised to see the boy's reasoning. The protagonist asks to join them, stating he will be loyal for the rest of his life if she helps him get revenge. The woman wonders how he learned the Cerno insignia. The crazy woman begins to laugh wildly. Excited, Regina tells Mateo to get ready as she needs to start the show. Before leaving, she asks if the boy understands the weight of those words, questioning if he wants the power of revenge, even if he has to stain his hands with blood. Recalling that his grandfather had said that no matter the means necessary, he should inherit Changgu at all costs. Decisive, the protagonist just nods his head affirmatively. With a smile, she says that barking dogs rarely bite, but even so, it was very interesting. The crazy woman kicks the door, asking them to follow her, claiming that from that point on, the boy's life belongs to the Cerno family, so he will live and die for it. Therefore, he must watch carefully as that is his future. Taiha watches indeed left stunned by what he sees. With that, 17 years pass, and he finally returns to Korea. The boy asks his father and mother to protect him while he takes his revenge. However, he seems to be surprised by something, turning around quickly to look back. He jumps to the side as several shots hit the spot. Several soldiers had arrived at the scene and fired numerous shots at Taiha. Getting out of some vehicles, someone questions if those insects don't even know how to aim. A security guard and manager of the Chonga group orders them to search for the senior administrative director, stating that he doesn't know that man, but he is certainly a madman for thinking he could kidnap a Cheongu director. One of the subordinates tells the manager they found the car they were looking for. He orders everyone to be careful when opening the trunk as the director is still alive. While he orders them to check his wounds, a large explosion occurs. The guy gets angry at the audacity of placing a bomb there. However, suddenly half of his men have their heads decapitated. When he finally looks back, the rest of them are also killed in an extremely fast manner. Taiha had defeated them all in moments. The guy notices he suffered a small cut on his waist. Nervous, he sees that this was thanks to the protective vests. Trying to attack the protagonist, the bald man calls him a little insect. However, the boy tells him not to think he is the only one with something to say. Quickly, he lands another cut on the back of his opponent, launching an attack that splits him in half. As he collapses, Jenong wonders what that was, not understanding how that managed to do such a thing, complaining about who that monster really is. On the other hand, the protagonist did not seem to be happy with it. He begins to clean his daggers as he walks away, heading to a luxury car and taking a bag that was in the back seat. Thus, he goes to the trunk. Squirming, the director begs Taiha to let him go, claiming he was only following orders. This was the former lawyer, Kim, the person who had ordered his death, stating that he had no reason to kill the chairman. However, the boy opens the bag and throws several bills over the man, informing him that those are the 1 million. After all, that money must not have been delivered to him. Terrified, the guy asks what money Taiha is talking about. However, the director remembers that day. The protagonist takes a lighter from his coat, stating that thanks to the fact that he died that day. While throwing the lighter, he says he was reborn. With that, Kim begins to be burned alive. Coldly, Taiha just watches with indifference. After that, he calmly picks something up, Placing a cigar in his mouth, the protagonist mentally tries to speak to his parents and grandfather, asking for forgiveness for taking so long, praying for them not to worry and just find peace, claiming that he will take on all their suffering from that day forward. After some time, in the middle of the city, a modern building stood out among the others. The protagonist moved rapidly, determined to act. Some men questioned where he thought he was going, preparing to fire to stop him. However, the madman simply kills both of them quickly. Even so, Taiha did not seem bothered by the unexpected encounter. He continues walking through the hall calmly. Seeing the situation, a man sits on the floor, terrified by the scene. Scared, he questions the protagonist about who sent him there. The guy says they are part of the Cheon-gu group, claiming that Taiha will not be safe after doing all that. While cleaning his blade, Taiha says that this is Holdings, a private security company subcontracted by Cheon-gu. Their main function is the protection of directors and board members outside of working hours throughout the gangbook area. During their downtime, they stalk journalists or people who have reported on Cheon-gu. They then kidnap and assault them, even killing them. In other words, they are hired assassins. The people who have been captured were completely desolate and desperate. The protagonist simply throws one of the daggers to an old man. After that, he tells everyone to use it to free themselves and to make sure they never saw him there. Thus, the restraints are cut. The three were still confused by everything that had happened. The old man stands up and brings the knife back to the boy. Running, they give thanks as they leave. On the other hand, the company member orders everyone to come back. One of the fugitives looks back while hearing the man complaining. The heavy-set man questioned who he was, asking if Taha was part of their family. Removing his mask, the boy says no and explains that he just wanted to have a more private conversation. He states that he needs the schedules of everyone on the board from the directors to the chairman. The guy says he doesn't know, and even if he did, he wouldn't say since he and his family would be dead if he did. The protagonist says that apparently the man prizes his life, stating that he will start with his eye, and as soon as he feels ready, he should raise his hand. On a building, a large screen outside showed news related to some celebrity. In contrast, several people were sitting on a staircase in a state of homelessness. Because of the heat, even a cicada lay dead on the ground. Breaking the silence of the place, someone seems to be in a hurry. While walking, Taiha notices that a cigar would draw too much attention, wondering if he should try Korean cigarettes. The avenue was very busy at that hour. He says he has finally returned to Korea, and so far everything seems normal, but he notices that his country is going crazy with various advertisements related to credit and insurance being announced everywhere. A politician was giving a speech stating that he would use his power and influence to eradicate the epidemic of crime and violence. He claimed that from that day on his war on crime would be publicly declared. However, his speech is interrupted by someone pointing a gun in his direction. It is said that in 1990 the president was killed during his campaign against organized crime. Since then, no one has opposed criminal groups, making the country a place succumbed to violence and money. The boy walked through the streets, lost in thought. Thus, the Cheon-gu group allied itself with criminal organizations to bribe the media and suppress competitors. They invested in entertainment and sports, making the population lose interest in politics to the point where even a dog could be a candidate. Even so, people continue to say that the Cheon-gu group was a company that did good for the people. Taiha enters a store calmly. The clerk welcomes him. Both he and another young man ask for a pack of this. They stare at each other for a moment, not understanding how such a coincidence could happen. Slightly annoyed, the protagonist decides to change his choice. However, both have the same idea and ask for a plus at the same time. The two stare at each other again, suspicious of one another. Awkwardly, the woman says that unfortunately, they only have one pack left. Taiha sighed deeply, clearly irritated by the occurrence. Stepping back, he tells her to give that pack to the other man, as he will be fine without it. The guy continues to stare at him as the boy leaves. After the man makes his purchase, he finds the protagonist outside, who politely says, "Excuse me," asking if he could borrow a cigarette. However, the man asks if the boy couldn't just go to another convenience store, but Taha explains that it has been a long time since the last time he was in Korea, so he would like to try it quickly. The guy gives up on trying to avoid him. While handing over one of the cigarettes, he says he can't believe someone wants to try that tasteless thing. Walking along, the man says he will get a fine if he smokes there, so he recommends waiting until they reach a smoking area. Observing this, Taiha admits that when you have been in a mafia for about 17 years, a simple look is enough to evaluate a person. Assuming that guy is strong as those he faced abroad, he wonders if such people are common in Korea. Also departing, the protagonist declares that he would not like to meet him again. After some time, that same man arrives at the place where the protagonist had carried out the massacre. While smoking, he calmly observes one of the bodies. Bending down, The guy looks more precisely at the corpses. He notices that all were fatally wounded by stabs from a blade with a length close to that of a sashimi knife. Putting out his cigarette in the pool of blood, he picks up his phone and calls his employer. His master warns that he had already told him not to call at that hour. The man asks if the guy has a meeting later, informing him that the best choice is to cancel the appointment. After all, the assassin who killed Director Kim might be after him. The guy who was calmly drinking his wine questions what is happening. His subordinate explains that he went to the security company and found them dead. From the wounds, it seems to have been a solo attack. Besides the assassin not being an ordinary person, it is very possible he knows the exact location of the meeting. However, his master says that a family meeting during emergency events is a custom of the Cheongu group. Questioning if his subordinate really thinks someone would invade a meeting that only family members know about, he states that he sent him so he could hunt that man discreetly. Getting lost in his thoughts, the guy notices that the wounds from that knife remind him of something. He remembers the protagonist asking for a cigarette, specifically his hands. As he took the cigarette, he asserts that if he doesn't use knives, there is no way he could have gained all those scars on his palms. With this in mind, Man asks his master if there is anyone in his family who is good with knives. Laughing, he says those people can barely slice an apple. Furthermore, everyone is present except for the children. Therefore, he offers another 100 million for Hyun to guard that place and ensure its safety. Leaving the office, the guy says he will go to the meeting. Even so, he asks for security to be increased. Irritated, his master simply says he understands. Handing his cell phone to another employee, the man says that the madman is just a gangster and still thinks he can give him orders. While walking through the hallways, he tidies himself up and prepares for the meeting. Arriving at the meeting, he greets his boss and asks when the chairman arrived. Talking on the phone, Weeman communicates to the leader of his gang that he plans to help the Changa group for one more day before returning. However, he is called a traitor. But instead of getting angry, he asks if his boss has been drinking. He informs him that they offered him another 100 million for the service, claiming that only a fool would refuse. Additionally, there seems to be a dangerous assassin on the loose. However, he notices that the protagonist was hidden in the alley. Quickly, Women finishes the conversation and says he will tell the details later, looking toward the boy. Finding innocence, he asks if one cigarette wasn't enough. Taiha says that finding someone of that caliber near the scene of the accident is no coincidence. Claiming it was good, he followed him. Smiling, the man says it has been quite a day. First, they took a cigarette from him. Then, they followed him. He ensures he can't believe he didn't notice him, admitting that was the first time something like that had happened. Moving toward him, the protagonist says that before they start, he would like to ask one thing, questioning if the guy is working with the Cheongu group. On the other hand, Man asks if he wasn't listening to the conversation, saying he is helping them temporarily. At that, the boy glares at him with a deathly stare. Drawing the two daggers from his back, he soon clashes his blade against the enemy's weapon. Both exchange looks, evaluating each other's skill. Thus, a frantic exchange of blows begins. However, Man leaps, getting above the protagonist. He swings his equipment to launch a strike. To his surprise, his bat is cut into several pieces. Seeing that, the gangster wonders when that happened. Furthermore, Taiha had disappeared in the blink of an eye. However, his opponent becomes nervous upon realizing something. The positions had reversed, and the one in the air now was the protagonist who quickly prepares to finish the battle with a certain fear. Juan admits that the Changa have found themselves in big trouble this time, wondering how they became the targets of a monster like that. Taiha plunges toward his adversary while wielding his blades. The gangster doesn't know what to do now that he is without his weapon. The protagonist lands a blow, knocking the man to the ground, already preparing to leave while wiping the excess blood from his knife. He heads toward the alley exit, leaving Humyan's body lying there. However, to his surprise, the guy asks if the boy is joking. Even wounded, he had not yet died, asking if even after all that, the protagonist is really just going to leave like that. He asserts that he will regret keeping him alive. Sheathing the dagger, Taha explains that he has his own principles, warning that if he were with the Changa group, he would already be dead. He tells the man to stay out of his path. Otherwise, the next time he hears of him helping his enemies, he won't be so kind. Furthermore, if he cannot accept the fact that he was spared, he can simply view it as repayment for the cigarette. Still fallen on the ground, man smiles as he realizes that a simple cigarette saved his life, admitting that this time it was very cheap. A little later, a car drives through the streets in a hurry. Obviously, the protagonist was the driver. For some reason, he seemed to be irritated and in pain. Seeing a wound at the level of his waist, Taiha says that at least the blow wasn't deep. While driving, he says that at least he can still move, hurrying even more as he only needed 32 minutes. He says that finally his revenge plan for 17 years will bear fruit with only 32 minutes left until the conclusion. Again, the boy is taken by memories of when he was a child. His mother begged him not to look while his father used his body to protect them both from the gunfire. However, extremely scared and worried, he runs toward his father. The man asks what she is doing, begging his wife to take the boy and run. Thus, his mother grabs Taiha so they can try to leave. However, the ship begins to move frantically. Even the assassins have to struggle to maintain their balance. His mother places the boy outside the door. She begs her son to find a life vest and jump into the water. With a smile, Haijong asserts that he needs to survive. One of the men says that it is annoying and mentions that he had given orders to detonate the bombs only after eliminating everyone. Looking toward him, the protagonist is surprised as the assassins know how to speak Korean. The man's face was completely covered by a mask and goggles while he aimed toward him and his mother. Weijong grows desperate and tells Taiha to run as fast as possible. The boy begins to run desperately through the boat. Besides being startled, the child was terrified. He ran panting while he couldn't stop crying. With the previous explosion, part of the yacht was already in flames, but then another bomb is detonated. Because of this, the ship begins to sink faster and faster, returning to the present day in the secret annex of Gangbook. The CEO of the Cheonggu Group department store asks if they really found the one who killed Director Kim. However, Jashong says it was likely a crime of passion. After all, the director had 2 secret lovers. His sister says that is very disgusting. However, the guy says that is ironic coming from someone who has several affairs. Jongwon asks what Director Kim's share in the company's stock was, claiming they will need to announce it soon. But suddenly, someone slams their hand on the table, drawing everyone's attention. The man orders everyone to be silent. Guho tells his son to speak. Chang says that 2 employees were found at the scene. However, they didn't have much to say and were discarded. Furthermore, they had confirmation that there were no other witnesses present. The guy says they were just subcontractors, so they don't know much in general, and the police guaranteed the incident wouldn't leak. Suddenly, his father throws a wine glass at his head. Everyone at the table was confused by what just happened. The old man asks where the Own gang is. Chong was visibly irritated by that. Even so, the guy cracks a smile, saying they don't seem to know anything, having even sent Huim, the 7th in command. However, the madman smashes a bottle over his son's head. The old man says that even in 24 hours, he didn't find out who the killer is or where he is. Instead, he reported a gang. He says that if the former chairman and Su Yak hadn't died 17 years ago, someone as incompetent as him would never have set foot there. In addition to the wine, the guy's face was completely covered in blood. Regardless of what happened, Chung ensures he will find him within the next 12 hours. The rest of the family sees that neither of them has changed, and this bothers everyone. Jui asks why he is so rigorous with the eldest. After all, he is still his oldest son. However, her brother says it's not out of hate. He asserts that surely it is out of fear. Grabbing a cloth, Chung immediately asks his subordinate to give him his phone. While cleaning his face, he looks for something on his phone. He questions where his men are. His assistant informs him they are already ready. The madman says that is exciting, saying he is looking forward to seeing how grand that entrance will be. On a road during the night, the protagonist headed toward his goal. Taiha admits he has always kept an eye on the Cheonggu Group 17 years ago. On the day he was accepted by the Cerno family, even before his grandfather's funeral, Guho became the new chairman, taking over all the shares and seizing his position, taking advantage of the disorder of the failed war on crime, and allying with factions like the Own Gang to increase his power. Even though that was the beginning of the Cheon era, they still hold meetings with official members at times like that. This was an old family tradition from when his grandfather was alive. Neither the system nor the traditions changed. Everyone killed to reach the positions within the hierarchy created by Sioko, willing to even assassinate their parents and him. One of the security guards monitored the cameras, wondering whose car was approaching. Thus, he asks his superior if the members are expecting a guest, but this is denied. He informs him that there is a car heading toward the front gates. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Seeing that it is likely some madman, the head of security orders the pillars to be raised. With that, some containment ballots begin to rise from the ground. However, the protagonist accelerates even more. After all, he doesn't need tricks up his sleeve to finish off people who have been protected all their lives. Taking off his belt, Taiha says it makes no sense to create elaborate plans. The front of his car is completely destroyed by the impact. Even so, he leaps out with his blade in hand, asserting that the only thing he hopes is that they haven't forgotten his family, so he can say it to everyone's face. The security guards look at the intruder in shock. The boy quickly finishes them all off in a single attack, and he claims that he is back. Confused, they ask what that loud noise was, questioning why it is getting louder and louder. Furthermore, it seems to be coming from the front gate. Unlike the others, Chang seemed to be confused but confident. His uncle tells the guy to go there and check the cause of all that commotion. However, surprising Zhongwan, he says there is no need for that. All the guards inside the hall point their weapons at the family members. The eldest sister questions what is happening. Guho, irritated, asks if they really want to play around at a time like this. However, his son stands up calmly while wiping his mouth. The old man questions if he will really do that. With a smile, Chang claims his father already expected this to happen sooner or later. That was the reason his father was always angry with him, as he was afraid of ending up just like his grandfather. With a terrifying face, the madman says that after all, the one who killed his grandfather and uncle was him. On the other hand, the protagonist was passing through the gates, saying his revenge would finally begin. The security guards point their weapons, questioning if this is some kind of ambush. Zhang asks if his nephew has gone mad. They question what the guy is doing, claiming that he should never point a weapon at his own family. However, Chang asserts that he isn't doing anything. Despite this, they continue swearing at him, saying they've made their point clear. Looking at one of the guards, Jui questions if he will really betray them for that brat. Even though he is her personal bodyguard, young Min apologizes, demonstrating that he is abandoning her. Even the second son's bodyguard says it isn't personal, but the rewards for betrayal were simply too seductive. On the other hand, one of them says that if they had at least received a raise, this wouldn't be happening. The only person who remains in silence is Chang's own bodyguard. The guy's father says he can understand the others betraying him, but he doesn't understand why his own son did it. He asks if his guard will really turn his back on them. Junsu just watches without moving or saying a word. The man says he isn't paid to protect the father himself, but rather the Chang'e group. Zhongwan asks if the guards really think they will gain anything by doing this. He tries to continue threatening them, but a gun is placed against his head. His own bodyguard kills him in cold blood. With that, both remaining siblings become desperate and beg for mercy. However, shots echo through the hall as blood spatters. Chang hands the cloth to his subordinate, walking calmly toward his father. The old man admits he already expected something like this to happen one day since the day his other son died of acute leukemia. And shortly after that, his wife filed for divorce without wanting a single cent. Trembling with rage, he says he always suspected Chang was behind everything and because of that always kept his distance. While spinning the gun, the guy says that for someone who ordered the deaths of his own father and brother, Guho talks too much. Placing the gun to his head, the man questions the old man about who it was that sent his own father and brother to the middle of the sea. He asks what else he could have done since if he hadn't killed them all, Siaka-san would have inherited the presidency and they wouldn't have reached this point. The psychopath approaches and questions why his father never declared him as the future successor. The old man becomes increasingly terrified by it all. Furthermore, his son was staring at him in a terrifying way, while claims that if he had done that, the boy would have killed him much sooner. He doesn't deny that he would have killed him earlier. However, he says he's a bit upset to hear that his father ensures that even by killing him there, the guy will never become the president. But Chang interrupts him, saying he already knows. After all, power transfers through political coups or violence are not recognized. That is a clause made by the committee. At that, the guy says it's a shame. He informs him that the person making a noise outside is not one of theirs. The president asks who it could be. While shooting his father, he explains that it is a young master who waited 17 long years for this day. The guards were firing at the intruder. They try to surround him since the assassin did not possess a firearm. The protagonist remembers that the core security force consists of the people who look after the executive members, so they hold high-ranking positions. Therefore, he assumes the bodyguards will be much stronger than the ones before. He stops running for a moment, changing the direction of his advance. The boy claims this won't be a problem. He moves toward the enemies in a zigzag pattern to evade the gunfire, using the body of one of the guards as a shield. Desperately, the man begs them not to shoot since he would be hit. However, the guards don't care and fire anyway, leaving one of the security guards terrified. His weapon is cut in half. In an instant, Taiha manages to defeat everyone quickly. The leader asks his men to evacuate the president as fast as possible. However, the protagonist throws his dagger at the guy. A guard manages to stop the knife. A guy in glasses asks why they are making all that noise, questioning if they can't do it in silence. 3 department heads appear to try and stop him, but that little group is simply ignored as the protagonist kills the others. One of them says he can stop him alone and tells his companions to wait. However, even though he is extremely strong, Taiha was suffering from the wound he received earlier. With every passing minute, the wounds seemed to get more serious. Coming to his senses, he realizes his enemy's fist is already extremely close to his face. Thus, his only option is to block the attack while being thrown backward. He manages to regain some of his balance, but unexpectedly, a shadow rises above him. The man asked how he dared to attack that place, and on top of that be distracted while invading his territory. However, the protagonist agrees and says it's not the time to be distracted by wounds, launching a cut through the center of the man's chest. This startles his companions upon seeing that sudden defeat. Quickly, Taiha throws his remaining dagger at the two who are left. Both were no longer as confident as they were initially. Surprisingly, the intruder had already landed a blow on the man who defended his long-range attacks. Chilho can barely keep up with him with his eyes, picking up one of the knives he had thrown. The protagonist cuts off the head of the last department head. Thanks to that, he had defeated all the security guards outside. While walking to the entrance, he sees his second dagger. He picks it up calmly, as if there were no one else there. While wiping away the excess blood, he assumes he took longer than expected. Even so, the place is strangely silent. Wondering if they managed to escape through some secret passage he didn't know about, the boy begins to walk through the house without knowing what awaits him. Finally reaching the room where everyone was dead and only Chang remained seated amidst the blood, welcoming him. He also congratulates him for making it this far, asking if he wants to sit down to catch his breath and rest. Seeing all that, even the protagonist doesn't understand exactly what is happening. Observing Jashong's body with a bullet hole in his forehead, as well as his Aunt Jui, even Zhang-Wan had met the same fate. The current president was also dead. Standing up, his cousin says he looks better than he imagined, claiming that modern assassins must take better care of themselves. Greeting him formally, Chang asks if he recognizes him. On the other hand, the protagonist only says the man's name and the fact that he is Gui's eldest son. Laughing, the madman says he doesn't remember them being so close to the point of him calling his father by his first name. Suspicious, Taiha simply observes that abnormal behavior. His cousin says he waited there because he thought it was disrespectful not to greet him. Plus, he needs to explain a few things, informing him that if he doesn't want to sit, they can remain standing as it won't take long anyway. Chang questions if the boy remembers that day, 17 years ago, the day he was rescued by the Italian mafia. Interrupting his speech, his bodyguard warns that the helicopter is ready, claiming they must leave soon as it is very dangerous. Getting irritated, the guy warns that he had asked her to call him only after he finished speaking. However, Taiha is suddenly surprised by something, clearly demonstrating he didn't expect it, saying he recognizes that voice, the voice of the one who killed his family 17 years ago. Recalling the man who pointed the rifle at him and his mother, the person who complained about the early explosions while laughing beneath the mask. Extremely angry, Tai asks if he was that worm. The madman begins to try and hold back his laughter, stating he doesn't have much to say, telling the protagonist to stop talking to him so casually as it's making him want to kill him. Charging forward, he tells the guy to try as his goal from the beginning was to wipe out the entire family. But his cousin begins to say that there's a saying that when you're in Korea, you must act like a Korean, ordering him to switch his speech. Irritated, Taiha begins to try to understand the situation for certain. He realizes that Chang knows he survived 17 years ago and also knows about the fact that he is a Salerno assassin. He wonders why Chang waited until his return 17 years after the event to stage a coup. Trying to get the boy's attention, the guy asks him to truly listen, saying he is about to begin. Only then does Taiha understand that in reality that madman doesn't want a coup. He wants to blame Taiha for the attack, claiming he was the one who led it so that Chang can successfully take over the presidency. Junyak tells the young master that they don't need an introduction. The protagonist simply holds his dagger out in front of him. The bodyguard begins to fire at the boy. However, the assassin manages to deflect all the shots. Using his blade, he diverts the trajectory of the projectiles, rapidly closing the distance between them. However, another guard delivers a hard blow to the boy. Even knowing there would be more, he couldn't predict the hit. Unlike the other, the man introduces himself as Juno Park. Avoiding being cornered, the young master moves backward quickly, stopping in front of his adversaries. Without wasting time, Youngui begins to fire at him again, admitting he is faster than the rumors, saying he would dominate track and field if he were professional. His partner blocks the protagonist's escape. Even Taiha becomes a bit nervous about the situation. Juno asks if flexibility is the secret to the young master's success, quickly delivering a frantic sequence of attacks. Taiha notices that they are strong, completely different from the ones he faced outside. However, if it weren't for that wound, he could even face them without a problem. Noticing that Chang seems to have lowered his guard, he realizes this might be the only chance before the guard Junsu arrives. Additionally, if the woman beside him is there are 3 guards present. However, There were 4 members at the meeting. Unexpectedly, his thoughts are interrupted by Juno preparing to attack him. Thanks to the reflection in his adversary's pupil, Taiha manages to identify the 4th security guard. Young Min was holding a sword, preparing to attack him from behind. To the surprise of both, he disappears from between them. They cannot understand how that is possible. Kneeling on the floor, the protagonist realizes that this must be the last one. The guy complains about being reflected, blaming Juno, but his companion says that if it were easy, the boy would already be dead. Reloading their weapons, Janie mentions he can barely imagine the bonus they will receive if they kill that guy. Thus, both he and the Guardian Glasses use their weapons to fire at the assassin. Seeing the situation, Chang remarks aloud that it is difficult to keep up with a fight involving both ranged and hand-to-hand combat. He warns that they were trained for the purpose of defeating him, as rumors of his inhuman speed had circulated through Interpol. Admitting he even thought about killing him with a bomb, he notes that the story of him dying during a battle would bring him better fame. Juno positions himself in front of the boy, intending to prevent him from escaping. Junie says it doesn't matter how fast he is. Everything will end now that Taiha has been cornered. With that, the guard uses his brass knuckles to try to land a blow. The protagonist didn't have much to do, simply watching the attack coming his way. His cousin thanks him for the show while smiling wickedly. After being hit by his enemy's fist, he is slammed against the wall, causing it to crack entirely. Flashing back to 4 years ago, Regina was scolding him and asking what that was, stating she had told him to take care of the traitor, not use him as paint for the walls. Even she began to vomit seeing that scene. Still arguing, the woman says that with his speed, he could have done it silently. Recalling the day they saved him, she says she understands his anger since Lorenzo always treated him well. But killing someone like that will only make people want revenge. Therefore, as his mentor and spokesperson for the Cerno family, Regina asked the boy never to do something like that again. However, the protagonist did not seem happy or regretful. Even so, he says that this way people will never know. Confused, she asks what Taiha is talking about. He explains that if they kill traitors silently, their deaths will not serve as an example, asserting that everyone needs to know what awaits them if they betray the family. Rumors need to spread in an exaggerated and distorted way. This way, the number of traitors will decrease. Otherwise, it will always be an incessant struggle. The woman asks if he chose the path of violent deaths to avoid greater bloodshed. Stepping away from where he stood, the entire surroundings were stained with blood. She says it is absurd for such a thing to come from a boy standing in the middle of a river of blood without a single drop on his face. Interrupting her own thoughts, Regina says that apparently being an assassin really doesn't suit him. Returning to the current moment, John-Ho freezes as a glow appears in the middle of his chest. The guy begins to spit blood while that glow continues to emanate. Even Chong and his female bodyguard are surprised by it. The protagonist had cut the man brutally. With a threatening look, he glares at his other adversaries. Scared, Yeongmin points his weapon quickly, but in an instant his eye is pierced. After receiving the attack, the guy mentally admits they underestimated that man since in addition to his speed, he possesses strength. Furthermore, those who truly saw his abilities never lived to tell what they are like. Despite showing all that capacity to continue fighting, Taiha was even more injured and his wounds were worsening. Junyuk was desperate as no one had said his strength was so great. However, Junsu appears and calls for the woman, asking her to take the master outside and claiming he will follow them shortly. Seeing this, the boy is surprised, noticing that his cousin is trying to leave. He lets out a shout, calling for the man. Cutting through both of Junie and LT, Unk and GT's weapons, he runs toward the elevator. Chong sticks his head out to see what is happening. With uncontrollable rage, Taiha questions where he thinks he's going when their stalemate isn't over. However, blocking the entrance was Junsu, who greets the young master. He is surprised to see that the president's bodyguard has arrived. Nonetheless, the boy leaps, telling him to get out of his way, but surprisingly, the man stops both knives with a single hand. Preparing to punch him, the old man observes that the boy has grown a lot, admitting he is impressed. With that, the man lands several blows all over the protagonist's body, causing practically all his ribs to fracture. Consequently, Taiha begins to spit blood after all that damage, breaking the blades of his hand. Junu declares that unfortunately, this will be his end, landing a knee strike in the same spot and throwing the assassin's body far away. However, the old man is surprised to see that his clothes had suffered a cut. Looking at his subordinate, the man tells Junie to get up, claiming he knows he is fine. Nervous, he admits he thought he was finished. The old man warns that the building will explode soon, ordering him to take his companion and leave. Lying on the ground was the protagonist, who appeared to be dead. Reaching the rooftop, the president's bodyguard heads toward the helicopter. Chang questions if he concluded the job. The man ensures he did and informs him that he will detonate the building as soon as they take off. Jun-soo says he will make the preparations to take off, but the guy tells him just to keep the door open and get them in the air. Putting on the headset, his guard warns that they will fly distracted inside the helicopter, so he suggests closing it. However, the psychopath asserts that he needs to see it, claiming he has waited a long time for that moment. With that, the helicopter begins to take off while Chang stands in front of the door. He watches calmly while smiling, swearing, and saying he always hated that house. While the guy complains about how annoying and hypocritical his family was, Dean and Jun-soo stare at each other. Suddenly, the madman remembers the moment the protagonist said he hadn't finished things with him. With a smile, he calls him a poor child. After all, he lived to get his revenge and ended up meeting the same fate. He asks if they both knew that the term family comes from the Latin famulus, which means slave. Taking the detonator in hand, he asks everyone to witness the way he will change Cheonggu from then on, completely destroying the mansion of those secret meetings. Inside, Taeha was lying on the ground, unconscious. Still dazed, he sees that it is the sound of the helicopter and realizes it's all over. Changing his mind, he declares that he still has time. On the other hand, Chang watches the detonation of the place. Throwing the detonator down, the guy says they really finished in a flashy way. While the protagonist leaps through the flames, the madman says he will lie down for a bit since it's so hot, telling his subordinates to go straight to the headquarters. However, Taeha hits him with his knife. Nevertheless, he only manages to hit his calf. His cousin begins to scream in pain. Both guards stand up, worried about it. Irritated, his cousin calls him an insect and asks what he is doing. The protagonist questions if he really thought he could escape after destroying so many families. Because he is hanging from a knife, his weight causes it to tear further into Chaeyoung's leg. While blood gushes, Taeha says he will kill him no matter how. Diane grabs her weapon and asks her master to step back. However, the madman takes the pistol and says he will do it himself. Pointing the gun at his cousin, Chang questions if he really thinks he is the hero of that story. Asserting that he is the main character, he calls him an outcast and tells the boy to die. While falling, Taeha manages to avoid the fatal shots, even if he was hit in other spots. With that, he is in a free fall. Immediately after they close the helicopter door, his bodyguard calls the hospital, warning them they have an emergency. The protagonist was falling from an absurd height. Luckily, he collides with a tree, causing his speed to decrease. Even so, he ends up hitting his back against the wall of a house, then falling onto a truck and rolling near a stream. Someone passing nearby on a bicycle ends up seeing that scene. The person stops and looks toward him. It was one of the victims he had saved from the security company earlier. The young man notices that this was the man who rescued him. Given the state of his body, the guy wonders if he arrived too late. However, he hears a plea for help. Looking again toward Taeha, he tries to observe more carefully. The protagonist was asking for help while barely managing to stay awake. Even extremely injured, he continued saying that it isn't over yet and asking for help. In a messaging app, someone had sent an 11-minute audio file. The person was requesting backup, informing that the guy had refused the breathalyzer test 3 times and insisted he was Congressman Kim. A man was writing something down while listening to the audio of the former director Kim, using his influence to threaten police officers. He asked someone if the voice and name are clear enough. The person questions where the director is at that moment. The young man informs him that he is likely at the station giving a statement and will head home shortly. His companion seems a bit hesitant. Consequently, the guy offers 200 and asks if that is enough to take down a major figure from the majority party. For a certain period, the only notification was that the person was typing, but to his surprise, the counteroffer is only 30. Obviously, he becomes extremely frustrated by this, asserting that it is worth much more. However, the buyer claims it isn't even election season, so no one cares about those old men. The guy says that apparently the buyer doesn't understand the current market, informing him that for a normal person, they pay 1x, but for a celebrity, it's 10 times. However, if it is someone related to Cheonggu, the value is equivalent to 1,000 times. Taking a deep breath, he realizes that everything revolves around Cheonggu. After some time, it was reported on the radio that an accident had occurred at a tower. Uninterested in that information, the guy turns off the device. He was preparing to leave. However, instead of being on the street, he was in a restaurant. The owner was already making preparations to start the day. The woman warns the young man that he will be late if he stays there. The boy says he's fine and claims he will arrive on time if he goes by skateboard. Thus, she tells the guy to eat something. However, if he did that, he really would be late. Suddenly, someone appears saying that the boss should stop playing around. A man enters saying the owner should sell the place before they stop being polite. Baksu asks the young man if he doesn't agree with him. The lady questions if they are already there first thing in the morning to collect money, claiming that delinquents certainly know how to keep themselves busy. The woman asks the boy not to worry and to go to school, stating that nothing will change anyway, even though he is irritated. There is nothing he can do. Picking up a knife, the madman says she shouldn't say those things rashly, claiming they're already 2 months behind. The guy tells the woman to sell the building and collect as much as possible, stating that both their interests align. She says she would never sell that place for crumbs, telling him to study basic arithmetic before coming back. On the other hand, the kid was at a station waiting for his transport. Exhausted by it all, he just sighed, not knowing what to do. He admits that in the district where he lives, the fights over redevelopment are rampant. With disputes between groups like Changgu and Ong, it is a very neglected area. It has turned into a lawless land where small gangs try to take advantage of the people living there. People like him and that lady have nowhere else to move. Upon his return, the restaurant owner had several bruises on her face. Even so, she only asked him to clean the tables. Worried, he asked her what happened to her face. A customer says he saw some men from Yaburi leaving earlier. Extremely irritated, the man says they are likely trying to pressure people into selling their buildings so they can redevelop them. She asks him not to worry and tells the brat to put his backpack in the back of the shop. The boy does as the lady asked. However, he throws everything aside in anger. Irritated, the boy laments as he realizes he really needs to do something. He recalls that before his father passed away, Dr. Yongguk was a great friend of his. She was once a professor in medical school, but ended up crossing paths with the Yong gang. Regardless, she looked after him. Everything that happened wasn't her fault, nor was the restaurant, even though her food is good and the dishes are always well made. Interrupting his thoughts, an idea springs to mind, remembering what that guy told him over the phone. After all, someone from the Cheonggu group is worth 1,000 times the normal value. Thus, the boy sends him a message again. The guy asks if he has any news. Though nervous, the kid tells him everything he has, sending some images that prove his story. He claimed that a bodyguard for one of Cheon's security directors, Juch, was hooking up with Miho, the leader of the ladies' gang. Still very afraid, he awaited the buyer's response. Not quite understanding, the guy asks what the boy wants with that, but soon remembers the values mentioned previously. The next day was a sunny Saturday. Some men in suits approach and ask if he is gray. He confirms it, but as he looks back, he already realizes he shouldn't have done that. The guy lands a punch in his stomach, knocking him out and taking him to a van. While being taken away, Gray finally understands why they pay so much. After all, it was nothing but bait. The boy was tied up and sitting in the security company's room. The leader says that initially he imagined he was just an annoying informant, but in reality the kid is very good. He questions where he got those images, asking if his father hid them before he died. The guy asks if the brat is Jingu's son, one of the people who reported Cheonggu. Seeing this, Gray gives a slight smile, taking off his watch. The guy asks if he thinks that's funny. With that, he punches the boy's face, questioning if that is also funny. Still beating him, the man asks if he has more files like that, hurting the boy more and more, throwing him to the ground while swearing at him nonstop. Even so, Gray cannot contain his laughter and continues chuckling. Still laughing, he says the old man looks like a piece of trash he would use as a toilet, stating that if he had more, he would have already sold it. The fat man tells his subordinates to bring the hammer. The guy threatens to pull out all the boy's teeth until he understands this isn't a game. But luckily for him, one of the security guards calls the old man. His subordinate warns that a call from HQ has arrived, stating they must provide security for the emergency meeting. Standing up, he says that if it really is priority number 1, it means they should go now. Thus, he orders them to gag the boy and lock him in the room. Kicking him inside, the fat man states he will return to finish this later. Inside were already an elderly man along with a woman. Still on the floor, he says his father was a fool. Driven by a ridiculous sense of justice, he didn't even try to expose Chonggu. He just died in a car accident with his mother. Instead, he should have just hidden to have a peaceful life while working for them. No matter how significant the information his father possessed, as long as he remained defenseless, it was all in vain. However, they begin to hear the security guards asking who that person was. With that, gunshots and screams begin to mingle. Even the leader was desperate as he ordered his subordinates to kill that man. Everyone begins to get scared, not knowing what was happening. Suddenly, the large door opens in front of them. The protagonist gives them the knife and tells them to use it to free themselves and leave. After that, he ensures that none of the 3 saw him there. Neither of them quite understands what just happened. They begin to leave while thanking him for the help. That was when the boy looked around and back one last time, observing those bodies. Gray wonders if that guy did it all alone. After some time, he finally returns home. Young Suk asks what happened to his face and where he was all that time. She gets angrier and angrier, asking the boy to speak up, but Gray says nothing happened. With a smile, a girl asks her not to worry. The boy heads to his room. The lady watches him, clearly worried. As soon as he enters his room, he collapses to the floor. Still startled, the boy wonders if it was the own gang who sent that guy there. After all, they had firearms, but he killed them with just 2 knives as if he didn't care. While opening his drawer to look for something, the boy continues to wonder if the guy was sent by someone. Closing it, the kid supposes there might be something more behind it, noticing that it might be revenge. Recalling the moment the department head spoke of his father, questioning if he had more files related to Changgu, the boy admits that no matter how significant the information is, it's worth nothing unless you have the power to use it. While accessing the files, Gray says he needs power. The guy says it is practically impossible to find him among those folders, knowing only his face. However, he ends up remembering what one of the subordinates had said when he warned that an emergency meeting was going to happen. With that, he remembers the Level 1 priority code entering Changgu's partnership directive. Seeing that this was also noted among his father's folders, he says he finally found it. It stated that in the event of a significant incident, the executive members would begin a meeting in the Bug Mountain Annex. However, even with all that information, the actual location was not provided. Giving up, Gray says he doesn't care. After all, he doesn't even know that guy. Even so, he says that not everyone who considers Changgu is considered by them in return. On the police radio, the massacre Taiha was carrying out is reported with several confirmed victims already. The extent of the damage was unknown, but it was confirmed the mansion was used secretly by Cheon executives. Standing up, the boy realizes it can only be that man. Thus, he decides to go there, taking his bicycle and heading out in the middle of the night. Even if he doesn't know who that person was or his reasons for doing all that, the best decision he can take at the moment is to go there. It was at that moment he saw someone hanging from a helicopter. After following the sound of shots and screams, the boy headed toward the place where the person might have fallen. However, upon seeing him in that state, he thought the man was dead. Seeing that blade in his hands and the person's plea for help, he notices his face while he declared that it hadn't ended. Gray is surprised by all that grit. After some time, he arrives at his house shouting for his adoptive mother. As always, she was working. Startled, the woman asks who that is and what happened to him. Desperate, the boy begs Young Suk to save that person. More time passes. The protagonist was already better and questions who he is and why he saved him. Gray introduces himself and says he buys and sells information, stating that lately he has been looking for something specific, claiming that he hoped to find someone like him. Doubting his words, the protagonist asks if someone like him could truly be a data broker. The boy continues saying he is more of an information wholesaler, always providing top-tier intelligence to his clients. Furthermore, his main clients are other information merchants and the financial sector of Wedo. He explains that he came close to death after falling into Changgu's trap, thinking he was about to meet a fellow informant. Taiha asks if the boy is one of the hostages from that day, questioning if he managed to recognize him despite having only seen him once. Gray confirms it confidently, stating that he wants to win an award for the youngest data broker or something of the sort. At this, the protagonist begins to look around, noticing the equipment the boy possessed. After that, he asks how many days he's been there, and the boy tells him that 4 days have already passed. The man wonders to himself if he really slept for that long. However, he calls for Gray and asks if such a broker would be capable of finding someone for him. But unfortunately, the boy has to admit he was bluffing, claiming that it was difficult even to find Taiha and saying he would need another broker for that. Furthermore, finding someone requires a lot of money, and above all, he would like to ask for something in return for having saved him as he spent a great deal on medical expenses. Ignoring everything else, the protagonist asks if what the boy is trying to say is that he cannot find the person. Gray questions what the guy would do if he weren't capable. However, Taiha simply turns his back and says it's fine. Picking up his suit jacket, he thanks him for the help and says he will pay him back as soon as he resolves everything. The boy asks if he's really leaving like that, but the protagonist says he still has matters to settle. As a final piece of advice, he warns the boy not to interfere or try to stop him as it won't end with just a single kidnapping. Scared, Gray just sits back down in his chair, but he soon cracks a smile, noting that apparently that's just how things work. After leaving the boy's room, Taiha notices a very strong smell of pork and wonders if the place is a restaurant. Surprising Taiha, Yangguk says that the boy shouldn't be on his feet. She tells him that he was hit by 22 caliber bullets, which made it possible to stitch him up, but if his fractures do not remain immobile, he will be finished even if a doctor helps him again. Thanking her politely, the protagonist says she must be the doctor who saved him, assuring her he will pay her back. However, she says she isn't a doctor, claiming to be the owner of a BAP restaurant, and asks him not to come back if his stitches open up. Thus, the protagonist goes outside. Looking around, he wonders if he is in a market. Ignoring these things, Taiha picks up a cell phone. Answering it, he notes that it isn't his phone. Gray informs him that his own broke, and until it's fixed, he can keep that one. Saying there should also be a box in his pocket with earphones, he asks the protagonist to use them. Picking up the device, Taiha is surprised by its size. The kid explains the battery connection and microphone, also alerting him that the first button on his shirt is a camera. The protagonist says he was very clear, claiming the boy will die if he gets involved with him. However, to his surprise, the boy asks why he is exterminating the Chonga family. The boy asks him not to be surprised. After all, even with Korea being a mess, something like that wouldn't go unnoticed. The entire country fell into chaos while he was unconscious with news that the entire Chianu family had been victims of terrorism. Taiha questions why he would want a favor. Even knowing that, the boy explains that in that neighborhood there are many power struggles between On and Changgu to secure redevelopment rights. Besides the two gangs closing in on the area, there are many other problems making life difficult. Even so, since the protagonist's problem seems more urgent, he will help. But in exchange, he wants assistance in the future. Until everything is resolved, they cannot lose contact. However, should Taha refuse, he says he would have to turn him over to the Chayangu. Obviously, the man does not like this at all. Nevertheless, he says he wants to see what the brat is made of. After some time, he was already walking in a busier area, heading to a luxurious building. Taiha had gone to a kind of bank where he had a unique safe. With that, he opens one of the drawers in search of something. Gray admits that he didn't know a company like that existed in Seoul, questioning if they could be tracked by it. But the protagonist explains that these companies work based on trust, so they would never consider dealing with other businesses. He says that people usually go there to hide jewelry or sins, making it the safest place possible. Seeing this, the boy realizes that apparently the guy is prepared to disguise himself. He becomes pensive, observing Taiha's actions. He is confused since the assassin had no firearms and a knife wouldn't be enough. Many drops of sweat begin to fall to the floor. His body was getting heavier, making it difficult to maintain a neutral face, also feeling as if he were being stabbed. He felt just like when Regina used to hit him. The protagonist questions if the boy found the guy he had asked him to look for. He asks if the CEO of the company Night and Pill is the broker who helped him enter Korea. Apparently, he worked in Europe, became famous in the field, and is supposedly looking for a clandestine ship to go to China. Gray explains that border pressure increased after the guy did that to the Chayanga family. The protagonist tells the boy to announce to the traders that there is a ship available with rates 10 times above normal. His companion asks what he's going to do when he finds that guy, questioning if Taiha wants to leave with him. Putting his knives into their sheaths, he informs him that he is going to kill him. The reason he almost died that day was because someone leaked his information. The only one who knew where he was Piljung. Coldly, the protagonist claims that traitors must die. Later, in a church, he admits he doesn't care if it's a longtime friend or not. A hooded person enters the chapel. Approaching the confessional, the man calls for the priest and asks if they can talk. He speaks a specific phrase. Everyone brings water to their own mill. Piljung complains about the place being very stuffy, wondering why they are meeting in a sacred place. He claims that he might not look like it, but he is a devout Catholic nonetheless. However, the so-called priest only asks where the money is. The informant looks for the money in his bag. Showing the 100 million won, the guy says it was more profitable to exchange it for $10,000. Changing the subject, Piljung says he needs to know something. After all, that country is full of frauds like him, so he can't trust the priest. Gray warns that there are many men outside. Suddenly, several people enter with melee weapons in hand. The madman states it is very strange for someone to secure a ship that even he, an information professional, couldn't find, claiming that the rule of that line of work is clear. If someone lies, that person must pay with their own life. He admits the protagonist must be prepared to face the consequences of his actions. But startling the guy, Taiha says he can hardly believe he wouldn't recognize the voice of his own friend. Piljong doesn't believe what he is hearing, saying they had assured him they had killed him. The man soon realizes there is no point in saying anything. Even so, he claims he was a fool, as he should have suspected as soon as he realized the password was an Italian expression. Trying to explain himself, his friend says he lost everything due to gambling, ended up in Korea, and racked up huge debts in the Chonga casinos. While reaching for his weapon, Piljung tries to convince him that he wouldn't have said anything if he knew they would try to kill him. But before he could finish his sentence, Taiha thrusts through the wall of the confessional and pierces his throat. He falls into despair while trying to stop the bleeding in his neck. The men outside ask what is happening. Through the camera on the protagonist's shirt button, Gray could see the guy's body and all the blood that had spread. Obviously, Gray is terrified. Besides having all those injuries where many would barely be able to walk, Taiha was still going to fight. Leaving the booth, the protagonist says that Pil Young certainly ordered them not to bring guns to avoid conflicts. The psychopath tells everyone to pray before they begin, asking them to tell God that they will soon be joining him, stating that it doesn't matter if they are contractors or subordinates of his friend. Gray didn't know what to do. Seeing all of that, the protagonist says that the mere fact that they are armed with clubs and knives is enough for him to consider them a threat to his life. In that case, there is no reason for him to go easy. They ask what that guy could do with a broken arm. One of them runs to strike, saying that apparently there is money in the confessional. The protagonist simply prepares to defeat them. The boy admits that the assassin's broken arm isn't the only problem, since he has fractured ribs and gunshot wounds. However, he moves smoothly while dodging the attack, and with a single movement, he pierces the back of his opponent's neck. Already moving to attack the next one, he dodges the blow again while simultaneously cutting the man's throat. Quickly, he throws the dagger into the neck of another. One of them runs to try to stab him. However, the John Wick uses his sling to immobilize the enemy. Quickly, he lands an elbow strike with his other arm. With that, Taiha had defeated all who went against him in an instant. He explains that when someone gains the advantage at the beginning, it is hard for opponents to avoid losing their way. Considering all that money dangling before their eyes, it was obvious that adrenaline would take control. Even so, there was someone else among them. One person possessed something they shouldn't, but some of those guys charge at him. The protagonist takes a simple step forward and in doing so disappears before everyone's eyes. Using his speed, he passes through the men. Obviously, his goal was to kill whoever could hurt him the most. The two who had stepped forward to attack him become extremely confused. Even Gray cannot understand what happened. With that, the gun falls to the ground after his charge. He calmly begins to turn toward the remaining men, asking who is next. Despite all that chaos on the outside, the church did not seem to be affected. In the parking lot, a single car was parked at that hour. Gray was inside, unable to believe what he had just seen. He assumed that the man almost didn't seem human since even with a wounded body, he still did all of that. Suddenly, Taiha calls for the boy and asks if he is listening. The protagonist asks the boy to go to the confessional and get a bag of money as he doesn't have the strength for it. The brat asks, terrified, what he is talking about, but the guy says he knows he is in the area. After all, he warned him about the men before they appeared. Gray doesn't know what to say in that situation. Even though he's a bit nervous, he simply accepts the mission. Thus, the kid leaves the vehicle and heads toward the church. With that, the boy goes to the door. A bit hesitant, he opens the doors. In front of him, the church was completely stained with blood and bodies. Sitting on one of the pews was the protagonist. He announces that he is up there. Getting even more nervous, Gray begins to walk. Reaching the booth, he notices the body of the protagonist's now ex-friend. He feels a bit nauseous. After all, there were many bodies scattered all over the place. The boy says he called a taxi, warning that it should arrive in the next 10 minutes. However, looking at his companion, the boy notices that Taiha is in extremely bad shape. He asks what is wrong with the guy, saying he will call Young Suk and ask her to prepare some medicine for them. However, the madman stabs his cell phone with a knife. At that moment, Gray freezes with fear. Removing a glove, the protagonist says that when he woke up, his clothes and phone had been changed. But the funniest thing is that his gloves were still on. Obviously, the boy just listens without saying anything. On Taiha's hand, the Salerno family mark was drawn. Looking at the boy, the guy claims that he knows who he is dealing with. Gray just nods affirmatively, recalling his name, his father's name, and the fact that he is the grandson of the late chairman of the Chayanga group. He is the only Asian member of the Italian Salerno Mafia, aged between 20 and 30, with a 5.5 billion bounty on his head. The boy states that he wasn't planning anything against anyone, ensuring that not even the lady knows, claiming he just needs his help. Taiha asks if that value is worth more than the risk of losing his life or receiving the reward for his head. Gray tries to say that the reason he and his adoptive mother live in hiding is because of Chongu, but the protagonist interrupts him. He ensures that the best choice for the boy would be to hand him over to Chongu instead of doing all this. Recalling the conversation they had earlier when the kid said he wanted to win an award by becoming the youngest broker, noting that the reason his career is stagnant, even though he could do more and even join the action, something no one in the business would do, is his lack of experience. That is why the big informants are usually older. With that, he questions if Gray wants to enter a much larger arena. A little later, in a large modern building, two people were walking through the hallways while one told the other not to say anything other than what he was directly asked. Hai gets angry and ensures he would never say anything that would put Ong at a disadvantage. His companion says that the gang members are not known for knowing how to express themselves correctly. Even though he is irritated, the guy has no way to refute it. The two enter while the man apologizes for keeping that person waiting. Returning to the chapel, Taiha praises the boys' work, saying he will fulfill the favor, but would also like them to work together after that. He tells Gray that he will be putting his life at risk and will not have an easy death if he is caught. However, he can become the best if they work together. The protagonist says that this is a promise. After all, he will crush Chang'e once and for all. The leader of the Ong gang admits he didn't expect them to call so soon since they understand that Chang must be busy with the funerals of his family members. He states they weren't going anywhere before making contact, but the guy raises his hand, asking them to be quiet. Both become afraid of what will happen next. The eccentric man makes a small gesture with his hand, signaling for them to stay silent. With that, he begins to nod his head rhythmically. A sort of speaker begins to play music. He raises his hand with a clenched fist, striking a pose of resistance. The two members of the Ong gang do not understand what it means. Nevertheless, someone begins to clap. The man accompanying Huim says it's a shame they arrived just as the piece was ending. Chong questions if he knows the piece. The man states its exact name, but notes that the composition seemed disjointed, assuming it might have been his performance. This clearly does not make the madman happy. He orders his bodyguard to turn it off. While Jian uncovers her ears, the guy says that was a 6th grade piano competition, admitting he never practiced again. Furthermore, all the relatives who went to see his performance that day are currently dead. The man questions if they know what happened, ensuring that if they had known who was coming, they wouldn't have been so defenseless. However, Huan asserts that he warned him, advising that they should have even canceled the meeting since the assassin was no ordinary person. While saying it was Chang who ignored his warnings, Chang reaches out, ordering him to put that cigarette away. He claims the guy was the one who knew the most. This visibly makes him angry. Chang says that it was a traditional family emergency meeting, something that cannot be canceled on a mere whim, claiming that was why he paid him 200 million won to handle that man discreetly without alerting the other members. The guy leans his knee against the sugarcane. While touching his leg, he says that instead of taking care of the assassin, they suffered losses, and now he even has to use that thing. With that, the man says he can't help but wonder how Huan is still alive when all the other guards died. The guy claims he already explained, saying that the assassin is killing according to his own rules, and he didn't apply to them. With a smile, the madman says that perhaps a terrorist rule is to avoid friendly fire. Obviously, this infuriates women. He tells the guy not to bark those things, questioning if they really think he would put the honor of his organization and parents at risk. Chang says it must be nice to have parents to support you, stating that even if he wanted to, his are already 6 feet under. Suddenly, the other Ong member adjusts his glasses, preparing to intervene. The man asks who is responsible for taking care of the terrorist. The guy ensures this shouldn't even be questioned, stating it was Mr. Junu. The girl again looks suspiciously at the old man. Huan's partner asks the bodyguard directly. The old man obviously confirms it immediately. However, even the guy seems to remain suspicious. He says he understands and asks what Xiang wants from them. The madman states he doesn't care about money or anything of the sort. He just wants to ensure they stay quiet about the incident. And if anyone asks, Kunmin has never seen the assassin before. The guy doesn't understand why Chang'e is trying to bury the matter. His companion lights a cigarette, asking if that's all they want. Chong tries to tell him to put out the cigarette again, but Jun Su touches his shoulder. Startled, the guy looks at his security guard, who speaks in his place and assures them both that this will be enough. The Ong representative states he needs time to digest everything, questioning if the bodyguard would also like a cigarette. However, the old man thanks him and says he lost his addiction. Nevertheless, Chang breaks the table, becoming increasingly enraged. He questions if both of them aren't afraid. After all, he will be the new president soon, asking what that old worm is doing. The guy lets out a sequence of insults and tells that little piece of Saul's to put himself in his place. Standing up, he says that is what his boss would say, which is why he is there in his place. Saying goodbye, the man addresses the bodyguard directly, claiming they agree to the terms. Throwing the cigarette, but on the floor, the guy tells them to have an ashtray next time and a wet napkin to go with it, preferably. With that, the three remain in the room in a deafening silence. Chong remains quiet for a few seconds, saying or doing nothing. Huan says he is truly incredible as he ended all of Chang'e's arrogance, just using his words. Adjusting his glasses again, he says that is his function there since apparently Cha Yong doesn't understand how things work, stating that the old president really taught him nothing and that he deserved his fate for not taking care of that brat sooner. The guy is incredulous, asking if he is really trying to say that. Calmly, The older man claims the incident was likely a coup planned by Chang to secure the position of president. The elevator opens, and they resume walking, declaring that it is imperative they find the assassin who attacked the Chayanga group. Huan tries,